Hey everybody, I'm just going to make a short video today. I'm coming to you fresh from a Fairfield Inn in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, as I make my way up to St. Paul, Minnesota to visit my sons for Thanksgiving. But I just want to talk about a couple different things. As many of you know, the World Cup started yesterday, Sunday, November 20th, and today is the kickoff of the U.S. group. We're going to end up playing Wales at 1 o'clock this afternoon. I'm looking forward to seeing that game. But since it's in the Middle East, it has to do with economics. I figured I'd just talk for a couple minutes about this. I posted a quick blog piece that I did with Brookings back when it hadn't been determined yet that we were going to get, we being Doha, we're going to get the World Cup. As you guys know from my talking about it, I spent a good 5 or 6 years going back and forth to Doha quite a bit, working on some aspects of human capital development there. But the impact of getting the World Cup really cannot be understated. When you look at the number of workers, the overall labor force in Doha, in 2009, it was approximately 1 million. By 2021, it was approximately 2.2 million. During this time, a lot of that labor went into constructing the infrastructure for the World Cup. Now, a lot of people are thinking about like stadia and the hotels, and those are definitely pieces of it, but also just the transportation systems and networks. They built a metro during this time that connects all the major tournament venues with the downtown area called the West Bay area that they refer to, as well as the Pearl. You can access that, which is a landfill-based built island that has restaurants and hotels and condos, developments and such, right there in the main, I guess, like lagoon sort of area where Doha sits. And all of this had to happen fairly recently. They announced the World Cup fairly far in advance. They announced in 2010 for something that was happening in 2022. They announced Russia and Qatar at the same time. But this really is huge, and it's huge for a couple of reasons. One, it's the first majority Muslim country to host the World Cup. Two, it's the first Arab country to host the World Cup. The first African country to host the World Cup only happened in 2010 with South Africa. So hosting it outside of Europe and South America and North America is actually still a fairly recent thing. South Korea and Japan co-hosted 2002. And so you did see a period of time where FIFA was trying to do different things. Now, there are controversies associated with this. It may have been great in developing Doha's infrastructure in terms of making it a modern country, a modern city-state, but in the past few years, if you've paid attention at all to this stuff, you've heard mostly about the controversy, and I'm going to talk about 3 different controversies. The first one is around workers' rights. This is a huge deal. There was a Human Rights Watch report that came out probably, I'm going to just estimate here, probably about 6 years ago now, that really pointed the finger at Doha and Qatar and saying that they did not do enough to protect workers and the kinds of conditions. And just think about the conditions. We're talking about 50 degrees centigrade. That's, back of the envelope calculation, 120, 130 degrees Fahrenheit, where these workers are having to work outside in the elements, doing hard work during the summertime, as these stadia were being built day and night for years and years and years, and all the infrastructure was being built day and night. Now, the estimates that come out about how many workers died on the site vary widely. You can hear the story of hundreds of workers dying. That's kind of what the Human Rights Watch and the Amnesty folks say. To only 3 is what the Qatari government says, that only 3 workers died while building the stadium. Part of this is methodological difference. One of the big things that is a complaint by the Qataris is that they basically look at any foreign worker that died like what the Human Rights Watch does, it looks at any foreign worker that died during this time period. And during this time period, a lot of workers died because a lot of people were workers. So if you take any population of 1 million people, even if they're able-bodied and healthy, you're going to get at least a 1 to 2% mortality rate. If you have old people in there too, then you're talking about a 3% mortality rate. So you'd expect every year for a population, I'm just doing the back of the envelope calculation to make sure I get this right, every year in a regular population of 1 million people, that somewhere around 30,000 will actually die. When you make them younger, when you start adding other attributes to this, maybe that number is going to be much lower, but you get an idea. Like any million-sized population, there are going to be people dying. The methodology that the Amnesty folks did was not great. However, the number 3 is probably also very, very wrong, because there's probably a decent amount of cover-up that happened with this. Now, I've talked to some folks that have done some studies about what actually happened on the ground and what was going on, and they will admit that the numbers are generally bad, and but they're not as bad as what the Amnesty folks will say. Some of the things that happened, one of the big glaring mistakes that they made was that they had a rule because they wanted to try to control the population, and so they had a rule that the supervisor was not going to be the same ethnicity, same national origin as the shop floor workers that they're working with. So think about this on a construction site. You might have a Thai supervisor supervising Nepalese workers that are working on a particular site, building a particular structure or something like that. If you're talking about skyscrapers and really tall buildings, this is going to be very problematic because you have communication problems, and this did lead to excess deaths, and there are people that died building these stadia because of mistakes that people made. And that is something that's giving a lot of people a lot of really queasy feelings about. Now, beyond that, people talk somewhat about the LGBTQ plus rights in the country, and that is a terrible situation. I heard an interview recently about someone who sought political asylum in the United States, a medical doctor, and he had not come out while he is in Qatar, but he came out when he was studying in the U.S., and he sought political asylum because there is no place for LGBTQ plus people in the state of Qatar. They don't know what to do. Society has no like language or rights around this, and so officially it's banned. And what does that mean? Does it mean you can go to jail? Does it mean you can be expelled? I'm not exactly sure about all the details, but it is a terrible situation for those folks there. Now, the problem that I have with some of this criticism is this is coming from sometimes people who are in countries where LGBTQ plus folks still don't have a whole lot of rights. We have the trans bans that are going on in Florida and Texas and places like that, Arizona, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama. We all have very specific rules that are often anti-LGBTQ plus folks on our books as well. And so that makes it very hard to say, well, we can look over there and criticize them, because the criticism can come right back to us. So I feel like a lot of the stuff, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a second, a lot of this stuff is more culturally, there needs to be more cultural context put around it, and that in the criticism that you hear in general in the quick takes in media, you generally just do not hear that. The final one is women's rights, and this is a long-standing kind of beef that I have. A lot of feminists in the United States are very quick to point the finger at women's rights in the Middle East, and there are movies like Not Without My Daughter that focuses on Iran, and other ones where the women are talk about honor killings and things like that. And there are some very abusive situations, and legally the legal system is not equal for women and men. That is definitely the case. However, again, it's kind of like the LGBTQ plus, but even worse in that I think the cultural context of like what is safe space, what is, where do women actually have more power, where do they have less power, and how do they navigate that space. And again, there are lots of things like, reproductive rights in the United States that we have limited access to for women. There are lots of things that are problematic with American society when it comes to how we treat women, such that I never feel like just listening to Westerners talk about criticizing the social cultural situation of another country is really ever appropriate. I want to hear the voices from the people themselves, and a lot of the stuff you've heard around the World Cup just hasn't come from the people themselves, and that's what I'm really problematic. When I do hear that, then I do pay a lot of attention to it, so I hope you can discern some of that as well. Now, that all being said, this is still a very exciting moment for the Middle East. It's a very exciting moment for those of us who work in the region, who care about the region, who have friends and family in the region, because it's finally putting them on an equal stage. Unfortunately, because of this tendency for us in the West to highlight any difference as an inferiority, right? Because they do things differently, it must be worse than us. We have women's rights, they don't have women's rights, etc. It's been a bit tarnished. And a lot of people are saying, oh, it's too bad that this had to happen here where things are so bad. Look, political rights are not what they are in the United States. There's not the same freedom of expression, etc. Not the same freedom of expression in the West and in the UK, etc. But there's also not the same freedom of expression in the UK as there is in the US. Don't go and pick it outside of McDonald's saying that they're causing harm to animals, because in the UK they will take you to court and you will have to prove yourself, that you have to prove scientifically that you have evidence that they do. Compared to in the United States, you can just say that and it's up to them to prove that you're wrong, right? So the differences in freedom of speech, may seem like this, but in a lot of countries, there's just kind of different lines we draw. So I hope that some of the cultural awareness that you've learned from this class will allow you to be a better consumer of the sorts of news that's coming out. The final thing that I'd like to talk about then is your presentation. We'll be doing presentations on November 29th when I get back, and the idea is that these presentations should be no more than about 12 minutes long. So I always tell people the number of slides should be 1 per minute. So if it's more than about 12, then it's probably too many. What sorts of slides should you have? You should have a slide which is a title page, right? Talks about all the group members, title of the project, the class that it's for, etc. You should have some sort of outline at some point to let us know what you're doing. Probably even before the outline, that you should motivate it. Tell us, just like you're motivating folks when you're writing, tell us why we should care about this topic. And then don't focus too much on the literature. That is often a very boring part, maybe 1 slide of literature or so, but then go into any graphical data that you have. Tell a picture with, tell a story with pictures is what I always tell people, and then focus heavily on motivation and results. Motivation and results. Those are the 2 things that people really want to listen to. Tell a conclusion, tell us how it relates to policy, tell us how it relates to the rest of the themes of the class. Tie it all together. I wish you the best of luck. Good luck writing these papers. Good luck working on the presentations, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a good one.